CIA psychic's final vision. The exact date Earth will be unmade. It's the date. It's fixed. He isn't loud, just cracked, like something brittle giving way. Control asks for coordinates. He doesn't answer. He swallows. Wave. The word hangs, then repeats, softer, like he's trying not to hear himself. Wave. A chair scrapes. The supervisor cuts the audio, orders the feed scrubbed. A red tag flashes on the file before the room breathes. To understand how a date could end a government program, we need to rewind. To Project Stargate's last months. To a mission profile nobody would admit existed. And to one viewer who followed procedure until the target seemed to pull him in anyway. The operative they couldn't break. He hated the nickname the team gave him, the metronome. Inside Stargate, it meant he hit with a steady rhythm others envied and resented. He wasn't the showman who charmed visiting brass. He didn't sell it with theater. He walked in, breathed, reported textures and motion, and his details kept showing up later in margins and maps. His track record wasn't barroom legend. It lived in annotated photos and clean session summaries. An industrial yard, he'd sketched matched later imagery down to a forgotten stairwell. A foreign site's layout echoed his ideograms with enough overlap to make analysts uncomfortable. Not perfect, nobody in Stargate claimed perfect, but better than chance with repeatability. That's the only metric that mattered in a unit buried under skeptics. The declassified CIA and DIA files show this culture clearly. Triple-blind tasking, feedback loops, viewer welfare memos. He read those memos. He signed the acknowledgements. He kept showing up. Off hours, small tells crept in. Spirals filled his notebook margins, tight during briefings, looser after long sessions. He stopped touching doorknobs with bare hands. He teased the monitor that future tasking left a noise in his head. He wasn't mystical about it. He said the best work felt like walking into an empty room and reporting the draft, the scent, the tilt of the floor. Process, he'd say. Not gift. Not prophecy. Process. Meanwhile, the paperwork shifted. You can see it in declassified logs. Fewer fixed facility reads, more anomalous indicators. A new colonel wanted strategic unknowns scanned early. Before they grew names you had to brief to committees. Tasking language got abstract. Instead of coordinates, he saw placeholders, technology, network, transfer. Then a word slid into an envelope like it belonged there, future. There was already a memo warning against open-ended time targets, cold, procedural, not mystical. It flagged expectation contamination, feedback loops, and viewer stress. If you can't verify quickly, you can't calibrate. If you can't calibrate, you can't trust output. Those cautions echo the real Stargate-era documents. Controlled protocols, limited question scopes, no absolute labels. They said, no dates, no names. Constrained to windows. Describe, don't conclude. If a target locks without coordinates, abort. He nodded along. He wanted the rules to be a door he could close. But success on anomalies bred more anomalies. The pattern tightened. Sessions that asked him to stand in the fog and tell us what matters left his hands trembling under the table. His monitor, a steady voice who protected viewers as much as data, watched him tense when taskers kept cues vague. He joked once, future is noisy. She wrote it down anyway. Then came the assignment that broke his own training line. Future Earth, structured as a constrained pilot. The plan mirrored real program hygiene, belt and suspenders blind protocols, randomized cues, early abort if emotions spiked. No dates, no labels, no theatrics. A clean test of descriptors over short windows, nothing more. They told themselves the guardrails would protect him and the program. He signed the consent like always, made a joke about burnt coffee, did the breathing he'd learned when another war taught his heart to sprint. Then he sat. The door closed. The recorder clicked and held. What happened next didn't fit the script. It fit his later phrasing. The target chose itself. That isn't doctrine. That's how he described the feeling after. In the room, there were only signs. A metallic tang he couldn't rinse from his mouth. A low hum he felt in bone, the kind grid engineers write about during geomagnetic storms. An immediate drift toward coastline geometry, no cue had mentioned. His ideograms, usually tight markers for structure, mass, vector, stretched into a rising line cresting over a clean trough. He didn't label it. He didn't need to. The monitor's hand hovered over the abort phrase. He tried to return to source, standard technique. The hum stayed. He tapped his molars like he could shake loose the taste of copper. It's not a thing, he said, almost apologizing. It's motion. They'd trained for war signatures, heat blooms, angles, hulls. He kept finding energy without architecture. He wrote pressure, scratched it out, wrote compression, left it. The pen marked intervals along the baseline, evenly spaced like rhythm mattered. She cut it clean. Abort. He opened his eyes, put down the pencil, said the word no one wanted. Wave. Not dramatic. Just factual. The room sealed the paper, bagged the tape, logged the abort. Procedure, textbook. But the waveform stuck behind eyelids. The metallic air sat in mouths. The hum followed him into the hall. 2 days later, under heavier blind and a new room, he sat, breathed, and drew coastline again on a clean sheet. That's when the unit realized a simple truth. Rules manage people, not physics. Whatever had locked on didn't care about their protocols. He didn't believe in prophecy. He believed in process and evidence. That's why his steadiness unnerved them more than any showman's hit. He wasn't trying to be right. He was trying to be useful. And when the future crept in, he wanted the rules to hold. They didn't. The target that chose itself. They went in soft, the way you test ice you don't trust. Earth. Near future. Significant global event. No labels, no dates, no guesses. The monitor's cadence stayed neutral. Stargate playbook, not seance. He let his breathing settle. The room thinned to pencil, paper, and the shy click of a recorder that didn't want attention. Stakes were already in the air. Time targets break tools. That was in real memos, viewer welfare, expectation contamination, no absolute anchors. If a target locks without coordinates, abort. Clean. Simple. He'd signed that line twice. He was the one who wanted rules to keep the door shut. The first passes looked boring in the way good data often does. Cool marine influence. Open horizon. Fine spray. Salt. He corrected himself on silence. Not silence, absence. And sketched a soft edge that kept echoing back onto the page. The monitor kept him descriptive, not naming. He drew again, and the line rose, crested, fell. Ideogram before language. His usual markers for structure and mass were missing. No angles. No architecture. Just motion. She prepped the abort. If it locks, end it. He swallowed, tapped his molars like he could dislodge taste, and pressed 2 fingers to his sternum. Low-frequency hum, he murmured. Grid engineers write about transformers singing under geomagnetic stress. He hadn't read those white papers. He was reporting a body feeling. Return to source, she said, a standard interrupt. He nodded. The hand moved anyway. The baseline picked up tick marks at precise intervals, like something in the rhythm mattered more than the shape. He scratched pressure, replaced it with compression, left it alone. It isn't an object, he said. It's motion. He was pushing away from war signatures. No heat blooms, no hulls, toward energy in a medium. She cut it. Abort. He opened his eyes on command. Wave, he said, ordinary as if naming a chair. Paper sealed. Tape bagged. Chain of custody signed. On paper, clean hygiene. In the room, the waveform stayed. The metallic tang sat in mouths nobody wanted to mention. 2 days later, they doubled the blind. New room, new monitor, randomized hour to break his rhythm. He sat, exhaled, and traced a shoreline so clean it looked like his hand remembered the coast before his mind did. The monitor stayed in script. Described dominant sensory. He rubbed his jaw. Pressure in ears. Copper daylight, he added, annoyed at himself for reaching for color. He wrote dense medium, crossed out air, left medium. Then the anchor dropped without drama. He spoke a calendar date, month, day, year, with the voice you use to read a serial number. No hunting. No flourish. The pencil hovered, then underlined nothing. The monitor didn't react. Training lives in those seconds. Describe motion. He drew the crest again and ticked the rising face like steps. Intervals, he said. It's counting. Across town, 2 junior viewers on a blind parallel task sketched uncertain curves with hollow undersides. They didn't name them. They shouldn't. Later, a judge who knew none of it tagged both as fluid motion profiles. Not proof. Enough to tighten throats. His body told the next part. Pulse up. Skin flushed. He wrote the date again, mirror script, tidy as print. That went into the log with a red pen. Mirror writing under stress is a leak you don't ignore. She tried a perspective shift, inland. He mapped low relief, old riverbeds, rectangular voids that felt like fields. The hum slid under the floorboards anyway. It doesn't care about us, he said, not to be dramatic. It moves because it moves. The room switched from belief to process. Tape sealed. Pages sleeved. The mirror page got its own bag. Courier at the door with a numbered case, because that's how you keep your own mind honest. A supervisor upstairs read, non-war signature, large-scale displacement, and stared at the word large long enough to forget blinking. Meanwhile, analysts did the only ethical thing, attempt to falsify. They ran his pages against decoys. They ran the junior sketches through a blind similarity score. Small spikes in tiny data sets. Exactly the sort of thing you ignore if you want to sleep. They couldn't sleep. A second unit, different building, clean blind, sent back a coastal curve with a long offshore arc they didn't understand. Their viewer doodled an hourglass in a margin and didn't remember doing it. He wasn't sleeping either. In the hallway, he leaned on cool cinder block and asked the monitor whether rules against dates applied to writing them backward. The rule applies to everyone, she said, steady. He nodded and looked like a man holding a heavy box at arm's length. The memo that followed didn't claim prophecy. It claimed hygiene and hazard, no alien intent, no kinetic signatures, medium coupled energy, fixation likely. It recommended a repeat pass to disprove the lock, and if the lock held, bracket aware without admitting a why. They weren't chasing monsters. They were trying to see if a coastline had put their instrument in a vice. The target pretending to be fog had turned out to be a rhythm. The program had planned to manage expectations. The waveform didn't care. The second pass, when he spoke the date, command framed it as hygiene. Repeat the task to disprove fixation. If the waveform was just a mental imprint from an aborted session, a cleaner blind would break it. They stacked safeguards, new room, new monitor, randomized hour, tasker offsite. He walked in with that careful quiet he wore before hard runs, sat, let the breath drop, and waited for the pencil to find his hand. Describe basic gestalt. Neutral cadence. He wrote, open moving edge. No flourish. The line of coastline arrived like muscle memory, a long run with a subtle dogleg and a shelf that wanted to fall away. He shaded water nearest the line, left the outer sea blank, like distance deserved respect. Dominant sensory? He pressed under his ear. Wait, he said. Pressure in the eustachian. Copper light. He made a face at his own phrasing, then wrote dense medium and crossed out air. They'd primed for war signatures, angles, hulls, heat blooms. The page refused them. The ideogram rose, shouldered, crested. He ticked the rising face with even marks as if a metronome lived in his wrist. Intervals, he muttered. It's counting. The monitor let it pass and kept to script. Describe landform. He mapped low inland relief, ribbed by old riverbeds, rectangular voids that felt like fields, and then he hesitated like the pencil's weight had changed. He spoke the date, month, day, year. No searching. No breath hitch. A number placed in the air like a file label. The monitor didn't break cadence. Describe motion. He drew a deeper shoulder, steeper, and marked smaller steps on the face. Acceleration, he said. Not a single pulse. Packages. He rubbed his sternum. Bonham's back. Across town, a parallel cell ran two juniors on a generic, fluid dynamics in geophysical context blind. Their pages came in afterwards, thin arcs with hollow undersides, unsure hands, no labels. A blind judge, no access, no leaks, tagged both fluid motion profile. Weak signal, yes. Correlated motif, yes. Not proof. Enough to keep the room from relaxing. Back in the chair, his body narrated. The pulse in his neck climbed. He wrote the date again, this time mirror script, clean like printing, as if hiding the number from himself. The monitor logged it with a red dot and tried the ladder. Shift perspective. Inland. He moved. Low ridges. Old floodplains. Grids set back. He tapped the pencil, annoyed. Baseline's wrong, he said softly. It's like the zero moved. He resisted labels and slipped anyway. Irreversible, fell out flat. He touched the paper like he could smooth it. Not because nothing recovers. Because the reference changes. The monitor didn't reward or correct. Describe sound. He listened. No wind first. Transformer animal later. He grimaced. I know that's nonsense. She didn't say it wasn't. Grid engineers use the same metaphor when transformers sing during space weather. He hadn't read those memos. He drew offshore, not ships, not rigs, strings of small rectangles riding the rising face. Light, fast, and closed. He paused. Shipping boxes, he admitted, almost embarrassed. He circled clusters near a choke in the curve and wrote supercav with a nervous question mark. He knew he was overreaching. He wanted to be precise and hated every guess. Chain of custody snapped tight as a reflex. Tape flagged. Pages sleeved. The mirror page bagged alone. A courier waited like a habit the building trusted. Upstairs, a colonel read a 4-line interim. Non-war signature, medium coupled energy, large-scale displacement, fixation probable. He signed for receipt and didn't initial the word large. He didn't want to own it yet. The analyst who'd rolled his eyes at the first pass now stared at a transparent overlay. His shelf break versus A. Known subduction margin. The fit wasn't clean like a poster. It was suggestive like a bruise under a sleeve. He wrote correlation, uncomfortable, then crossed uncomfortable and replaced it with high. He was tired of hedging feelings into adjectives. He kept the session descriptive. Described the most prominent man-made. He marked low linear clusters inland. Not towers. Arrays. He dotted offshore traffic, then struck it out. Not static. He tapped again inland. Redundant lines. Feels like power. He shaded a box and X'd it. Substation by salt fails. He moved his pencil upriver and circled a square. Transfer yard holds for hours, then not. He didn't say city names. He refused to be lured into guessing. He did what viewers do when they need to feel useful. He reached for numbers he trusted. In the corner, a compass rose with a quick north hash. Bearings between shoreline segments. Then, quietly, degrees and decimals slid onto the margin. No preface, no apology. The monitor wrote down what she saw and didn't call them coordinates. The analyst would later. Then the small human breach. He lifted his head. Does the rule against dates apply if my hand does it by itself? He asked, like a man asking whether a lie told in a dream counts. She stayed in the line. The rule applies, she said gently. He nodded, grateful for the constraint and hating it. They tried one more interrupt. Move to a time before the dominant motion. He did. The pencil slowed. Curtain in the sky, he said soft. Wrong color light. Hair wants to stand. No birds. He wrote stillness before pull, then underlined stillness, annoyed at himself for sounding like poetry and refusing to erase it. Impact spread without quotes. Procurement forwarded a dormant resilience pilot to an inland committee with a new note, accelerate. A data center RFP added inland redundancy and EM shielding in an appendix nobody reads unless told to. A coastal hospital quietly checked generator fuel against a longer outage curve. The memo language stayed careful, multi-hazard, episodic extremes, all hazards continuity. Nobody wrote the word he'd spoken like a grocery item. In the debrief, no one argued belief. They argued procedure. We've got a date, an analyst said, careful to keep tone flat. The colonel nodded once and pointed at the bracket of numbers in the margin. We need where, he said. Not prophecy. Logistics. He wasn't asking the ocean for mercy. He was asking a map for routes. Walking out, the operative paused at the doorframe, palm on painted steel like he was grounding a charge. If it's counting, he said to the air, we should too. He didn't look back. The monitor watched him go and wrote, in the corner of her notes where comments usually die, 3 words that would name the next task, locate the crest. The coordinates, where the final wave hits. They framed it like triage, not prophecy, contingency. Locate the crest, the tasking read. No names, no guesses, just geolocation of the previously described coastal gestalt within a near-future window. He came in stripped of ritual. No coffee chat, no small talk, only that steady breath he used to level his mind when the room felt tilted. Stakes were human, not abstract. A bracket on a map is hospital routes, port cranes, bridge pilings, children in school gyms. The colonel upstairs didn't need a headline, he needed latitude that could carry a budget. He started with hangback mapping, the way he did when precision made him shy. A long coast run, low relief inland, a subtle dogleg that pulled the line like a string, then a narrowing into an inlet that didn't want to say its name. He shaded the near water lightly, left the outer water white, then stopped shading as if he'd reached an edge he could feel. Shelf, he said to nobody. The pencil rode the shore out, then dropped in one clean contour. Steep break. Describe the interface, the monitor said, neutral. He pinched the air like he was feeling thickness. Different hardnesses, he said, annoyed with himself for sounding vague. The medium couples. He traced the break again and, without meaning to, ticked it at even spacing. Preferred intervals. He scratched that, wrote resonance points, then grimaced. Wrong word for rock. Keeps showing up anyway. He refused labels, so he reached for bearings. A compass rose in the corner. Quick hash for north. This run trends west-southwest, he muttered. This elbow points northwest. He wrote 2 digits with decimals, hesitated, then added a third. Angles feel right, he said, almost apologizing. The monitor stayed quiet. She'd learned to let numbers arrive like weather. Landmark without naming, she said. He drew low linear clusters inland, redundant lines, not towers. Arrays, he said. Feels like power. He put an X near the waterline. Substation by salt fails. Upstream, he circled a square. Transfer yard holds hours, then not. He dotted offshore and crossed it out. Traffic, not structures. He paused. Lines of small enclosures on the rise. He didn't want to say the word containers again. He didn't have to. He went still, then wrote numbers in the margin, degrees, minutes, tenths, without looking up. A latitude that lived in the mid-40s north. A longitude in the negative 120s. He bracketed a narrow band with plus-minus marks, so tight the analyst later underlined them twice. He hated guessing. He loved bracketing. He slid the pencil and tightened the band again, as if the Earth's rotation was a knob he could turn with his hand. Describe bathymetry outward, she said. He drew isobaths like ribs, closer together past the shelf, then spaced wider, then kinked by a small bump. Seamount or bank, he said. He tapped the kink. This reflects energy back at the face. He paused, pressed his thumb into the paper right where the shelf dropped. Coupling here, he whispered. The thumbprint stayed, a smudge at the hinge of the drawing. Analysts down the hall laid transparent overlays without comment. His shelf break sat over a known subduction margin with a fit too neat to laugh off and too messy to brag about. Hazard maps, those calm, color-graded lies we used to sleep, went under the band like a confession. Known run-up corridors lined with old riverbeds matched his arrows inland. Nobody said the name. They didn't need to. He reached for one more anchor. Magnetic north offset feels. He caught himself, scratched out the thought, and wrote declination? Small, like he didn't want to own the word. He adjusted the compass, rose a hair, and corrected one bearing by 1.5 degrees. I don't like that I did that, he said. It feels like cheating. The monitor didn't praise or scold. She logged it. There was a human leak. He whispered 2 syllables that could be a city or a saint, and then shut his mouth like it hurt. The pencil didn't move while the words sat between them. She didn't ask for it again. The rulebook is a mercy when conscience wants gossip. Describe failure sequence at the line, she said, pulling him back to work. He marked cranes tilting, rails twisting, containers breaking their stacks, and riding back through the mouth of the inlet like toys in a tub. Ports fail first, he said. Grid by salt next. He X'd low squares in a rhythm that felt rehearsed. Hospitals that bet on diesel near water lose power before surge. He circled a dot up a slope. This clinic stays lit longer than it has any right to. He mapped bridges like tendons, 2 failing at Scour, one holding on pilings sunk deeper than the budget wanted to pay for. He drew arrows up side streets nobody plans to use, and wrote the kind of sentence that becomes a meeting. Roads that weren't roads become corridors. He tapped small numbers on hills. Elevation buys minutes. Minutes become lives. Across the hall, procurement turned 1 email into 3. Inland fiber redundancy got a bump. A raised substation spec slid into a bid under multi-hazard resilience. A coastal commission advanced a vertical evacuation landscape that looked like a park on paper and a staircase when the water comes. No one invoked prophecy. They invoked codes. He sat back, tired without drama. If the bracket's right, he said, you don't wait for certainty. The monitor kept her voice level. Describe the after you can live with. He made a small box on a slope above a river bend and wrote one word near it in neat letters, after. Then he wrote numbers again, smaller, tighter, until the margin looked like breath marks on a song. Upstairs, the colonel initialed the bracket and skipped every adjective. Latitude, longitude, shelf break, inland corridors. He filed the page in a drawer someone else would lock and signed a funding line with a name that wouldn't scare anyone. Resilience Pilot Expansion. He didn't need belief. He needed a truck on a Tuesday. The operative stood, pressed a palm to the tabletop where his thumbprint stained the shelf, and asked the only question that sounded like prayer from a man who didn't pray. Is inland far enough? She didn't have an answer. She had a pencil, a map, and a deadline. Not an invasion, a planetary mechanism. Alien threats fit budgets. You can brief a fleet. You can point a camera at a sky and sell a villain. What sat in his pages wasn't a craft or a species. It was a machine we live inside. in a building built on agency that felt like helplessness with a header. Analytics stripped the sessions down and rewired the question. If wave wasn't artillery, what in Earth's coupled systems could move energy like intent? They started where physics makes you start: space, weather, and the field that holds the line for us. When a coronal mass ejection shoves Earth's magnetosphere, it's not vibes, it's pressure. Compression sunward, tail stretched leeward, currents induced in long conductors we built to be efficient and accidentally made into antennas. Big storms make transformers sing, and sometimes fail. Flights route away. Aurora drops where tourist brochures don't expect it. None of that equals water moving. It does equal a shove at the top of the stack. From there, the chain. Magnetosphere compresses, ionosphere shifts, atmospheric pressure fields adjust. The ocean sits under that moving ceiling. Air-sea coupling is not a metaphor, it's a friction surface. Most days it's small. Some days, with the right geometry and frequency, it's a hand on the water. He'd written medium couples. The analysts stopped calling that poetic and started treating it as a note. They pulled the papers nobody opens without grant codes. National Academies reports on extreme space, weather, and ground-induced currents. Naval studies on coastal shelf resonance. NOAA briefs on long-wave amplification in specific basins. The language is dull by design, but the through line is clear. Frequency and geometry matter. Give a shelf a push at its natural period, and it rings. He kept insisting quietly, it's counting. Not periodic, not clockwork. Intervals. The room didn't force a word. They wrote phase alignment. Solar tide plus lunar tide plus magnetospheric pressure plus the ocean basin's own modes. Sometimes those vectors add. Sometimes they cancel. Sometimes they stack, and you get motion that feels like will because it refuses to stop at the first crest. A contract geophysicist folded in subduction mechanics without theater. Offshore margins store energy for centuries. Failure isn't random. Stress loads concentrate on asperities, stuck patches, until rupture. Does space weather trigger quakes? The literature is cautious. Some studies find weak correlations with tidal extremes. Others find nothing but noise. The team stayed honest. Suggestive, not proven. Still, his tick marks along the shelf break read like a field note from someone hearing a system find its tempo. Then the sky he kept describing, the copper daylight, the curtain, the quiet before air remembers to move. Severe geomagnetic storms alter the upper atmosphere. Radio goes sideways. Auroral ovals sag equatorward. People at mid-latitudes taste ozone and call it metallic. Again, not proof. A concordance. The operative wasn't citing Carrington. He was registering the signatures bodies notice when physics scales up. They cross-checked the human habit of making disaster a person. It wasn't an invader. It was alignment. A shelf tuned by geology. A margin waiting its century. Atmosphere under pressure. An ocean that doesn't care what we call it. It sounded bloodless until they laid it on a map and watched city names line up with contours that don't move when you pass a law. Complication needed daylight. They called in the skeptic from down the hall. The one who punctured myth talk with a pin. She wrote in the margin, no single cause. She underlined it twice. Multivariate, conditional, poorly constrained. She was right. They left the sentence like a ballast. Then she added, almost reluctantly, coupling pathways documented. That stayed too. Parallel tracks kept doubling back. Cascadia planning documents, dry, meticulous, already treat a full margin rupture and basin-scale tsunami as inevitable on a longer clock than anyone's term. Those plans don't mention space weather. They don't have to. They still map the same corridors he sketched and assume ports and grids by salt fail first. The fit didn't make the wave real. It made the preparation feel less like prophecy and more like catching up. The policy pivot came with a sticky note that looked harmless. You can't fight physics, you can shape behavior. If the energy isn't negotiable, you harden what you can and keep people from stampeding. That's where the distraction memo grew teeth. Alien headlines are manageable. Planetary mechanism with a date breaks calendars and mortgages. They chose stability with a quiet asterisk. Move money inland, don't say why. He pushed back on one idea and wouldn't let go. Irreversible doesn't mean forever, he told the monitor. It means baseline moved. The analysts adopted it because it made engineers nod. After a basin rings, shorelines change, ports shift, codes. Rewrite. You recover function. You don't recover the old reference. It's a cruel, useful sentence. They kept separating what they knew from what they wanted. Known, Magnetosphere compresses, currents induce, aurora wanders, the upper atmosphere swells. Known, shelves and bays have resonant modes. Known, subduction margins rupture. Unknown, whether a space weather peak can time a rupture in a specific window. Unknown, whether the counting in his hand was a human rhythm or a system's. They wrote contested in the younger Drya's notes and refused to lean on it. Abrupt change is real, that hypothesis is debated. It didn't need to carry their story. Meanwhile, practical men and women moved steel. Inland substations, raised controls, vertical egress dressed as parks. Multi-hazard on every cover. The machine they live inside will do what it does when vectors align. Their job is to give people stares. He didn't see a fleet. He saw timing. A hum you can't argue with, a curtain you can't vote down, and a coastline shaped like an answer to a question no one wanted to ask. In the end, that's why the date felt like a fuse. Not because an enemy was coming. Because the machine might be about to keep time. The paper trail they couldn't erase. If a thing this big brushed a government program, the evidence wouldn't be in speeches. It would be in paperwork that forgot it was part of a story. We started with what's public. Declassified Stargate-era memos where the language is antiseptic and the stakes leak through anyway. One stood out because of timing, not tone. Issued right after those last sessions. A moratorium on open-ended future tasking. It cites viewer welfare, expectation contamination, and data integrity. It doesn't mention a wave. It closes the door they'd cracked. Budgets tell on themselves. Not the glossy lines, the anomalies. Small, steady transfers toward coastal resilience pilots, hidden under transportation, health, and information services. The line items read like housekeeping until you stack them. Feasibility for vertical evacuation in towns that never say tsunami. Overwash-resistant ingress at municipal buildings far from storm history. Substation elevations nudged inland behind phrases like all hazards continuity. It's plausible planning. It's also a footprint that lines up with his bracket. Procurement language shifted with an almost shy precision. Data centers that once bragged about ocean-cooled efficiency began asking for inland redundancy, EM shielding, and longer on-site fuel in appendices some evaluators never read. RFPs started to require salt mist isolation, 2 zip codes from the coast. That's space weather and surge mitigation without admitting either. You could call it climate foresight. The timing made it feel like someone had read a sealed page. Paper carries dissent, too. A meticulous analyst drafted a proposal to fold extreme coastal surge into public hazard messaging. Plain language, no dates, drills that name the thing. The email trail praised rigor, routed it to stakeholder review, and parked it. Her next assignment was inland flood modeling. The project died without a meeting. It's not a smoking gun. It's a familiar burial. We pulled state resilience plans that never use prophecy words and found maps that quietly expand red zones inland along river corridors, the same corridors he arrowed. Cascadia playbooks talk about subduction tsunamis and multi-month outages with the calm of engineers. They don't mention copper skies. They don't have to. They assume ports go first, grids by salt follow, hospitals blink before surge. A Federal Labs tabletop scenario for a 9-point offshore event modeled black starts for the western grid with recovery curves that look a lot like the timeline he scrawled, months, not weeks. Different inputs, same cadence. A microstory makes policy human. A coastal contractor got a spec to retrofit a small-town building, breakaway walls, elevated mechanicals, a top-floor refuge with independent comms and water. Wrong coast, he joked. The project manager didn't laugh. Build to paper. He poured the bolts, cut the breakaways, installed a VHF antenna he never photographed. Months later, a mild storm shaved their parking lot by 6 feet. He stopped joking. We kept forcing ourselves back to what's verifiable. CIA and DIA Stargate documents really do stress hygiene. Triple-blind protocols, no naming, viewer welfare, caution with unverifiable targets. Those are facts. NOAA and state hazard agencies really do publish run-up maps and vertical evacuation guidance for the Cascadia coast. National academies really do warn that extreme space weather can induce currents that damage transformers far from the event, and that the upper atmosphere swells during superstorms. Geophysics literature really does document shelf resonance and base seiches. Frequency and geometry amplify long waves. Evidence for tidal triggering of quakes is mixed. The strongest claims are modest and conditional. The younger Drya's impact idea remains contested. We treated it as an example of abrupt change, not a linchpin. We marked contested, where it belongs, and let the rest stand. The distraction architecture left paper, too, polite words that mean keep attention fragmented. An interagency deck floated ambient distraction to maintain stability during multi-hazard windows. UAP releases with just enough credibility to keep debate spinning. Platform policy tweaks that reduce harmful speculation, and quietly downrank posts that combine coastal maps with dates and evacuation language. Simultaneously, grants for resilience corridors upgraded inland roads that happen to be the same ones in Cascadia evacuation plans. Two halves of a strategy: keep people scrolling while moving steel. Another breadcrumb came with a lawyer's fingerprint. A procurement thread flagged tsunami-safe stairwell as legally risky. Council recommended vertical evacuation. The spec stayed. The ribbon-cutting thanked donors for a community view platform. The staircase is there when the water comes. Language keeps the peace. Concrete keeps the living. Inside agencies, you can hear the calculus in the way memos avoid verbs. Low probability/high impact hazards necessitate diffuse mitigation. Diffuse is a way to say everywhere and nowhere. No single headline. Tweaked building codes. Lifeline corridors strengthened. Assets bought inland under dull names. Exercise names that hide their teeth. It looks like bureaucracy being itself until you overlay it on his bracket and watch it align. We found one refusal that reads like a human voice under fluorescent lights. A mid-level official wouldn't sign the memo that greenlit the distraction suite. Her dissent argued for informed consent, phased retreat incentives, drills with plain words, hospital relocations explained, not disguised. She resigned. A reporter got a hint and missed the story. The item ran as an oddity and drowned in celebrity noise. Meanwhile, a hospital network quietly shifted a backup ICU 20 miles inland. Here's what the paper can't prove, and what it can. It can't prove a man spoke a date and was right. It can't prove a magnetosphere will shove a shelf into ringing on a timetable. It can prove that a government closed the door on future tasking right when a viewer locked on time. It can prove budgets slid inland under harmless labels. It can prove procurement dressed stairs as parks and elevated power behind neutral adjectives. It can prove platforms tuned feeds away from maps with dates while resilience grants poured into roads that climb. Paper doesn't do prophecy. It does priorities. And priorities already moved. The sky that went quiet. He kept coming back to it even when they pushed him toward bearings and grids. The sky's wrong, he said, like reporting a hallway smell. Not apocalypse, details. Winds mute. Air that feels pressed. A sheet of light hanging where sheets don't belong. Mid-latitude aurora shows up in records during severe space weather. He described a steady curtain. No dancing ribbons, just gauze, copper at the edges, humming without sound. Stakes ride in that sensory list. If his sky is right, the sequence isn't only water. It's air losing contrast first. Pressure fields flatten. The atmosphere swells under magnetospheric compression. HF radio gets weird. GPS wobbles. Transformers start that tired animal song grid engineers talk about in workshops. He didn't know the terms. He rubbed his forearm. Hair feels heavy, he said, and pressed a thumb under his ear. Wait here. Not pain. Just wait. He tried to stick to describing. Light's wrong, he added sheepish. Copper daylight. Shadows don't bite. Flat light means the sky's distributing brightness without edges. You lose cues your eyes use to tell time and distance. He sniffed, frowned. Ozone. A metal taste in the back of the throat. People report metallic rain during dust and electrical events. Ozone smells sharp, bleach-adjacent, during strong fields. He wasn't citing studies. He was tasting signatures. The monitor tugged him down to the surface. Describe ground-level motion. He listened. Wind should be here. It isn't. He paused. Birds none. The absence landed heavier than the curtain. He drew a long, low arc above his coast sketch and shaded the bottom edge, then stopped shading, like expecting someone to scold him for naming the sky. This sits, he said. The analyst later wrote magnetospheric compression with a question mark. Not proof. A bridge. He did what careful viewers do. He tested the wrongness from another angle. Sound before the pull, she asked. He closed his eyes. Quiet like a studio, he said. Not peaceful. Held. Calm as comfort until it isn't. In hazard briefings, they warn about the deceptive lull before long waves. He wrote it anyway, irritated at his own lyric, stillness before pull. He He underlined stillness and didn't erase it. Complication pushed. Through his body. He rubbed his sternum like the hum had teeth. Bone resonance, he muttered, then shot the monitor an apologetic look. He knew analysts winced at that phrase. She didn't correct him. During extreme space weather, ground-induced currents can make big iron structures, and people leaning against them feel vibration. He wasn't saying Carrington. He was logging a body tell. Describe the curtain, she said, keeping him precise. Steady. Faint scallops on the lower edge, he answered. Wrong latitude. No rip. He dragged the pencil along the horizon and tapped the scallops like steps. He didn't label them. He kept counting. The tick habit returned on its own. He wasn't finding patterns to please a room. He was reporting rhythms that kept refusing to leave. He shifted inland like he needed to breathe different air. Rain tastes wrong, he said. Iron smear on tongue. He drew a tiny symbol over a treatment plant upriver and circled it. Brown taps before surge, he said. The sequence matters. A grid sag under space, weather can starve pumps. Plants go to boil notices while streets still look ordinary. That's how you lose hours you needed later. The human leak returned. If the sky looks like that, he asked, do we tell them? The monitor stayed with process. Describe first wave arrival relative to the quiet. He listened again. Curtain already there, he said. Silence holds. Then the pull. He moved the pencil to the shoreline. Water leaves like it's been called. Then the shoulder climbs. He was careful not to dramatize. Minutes, not seconds. Analysts cross-checked his sky against known signatures without letting desire write the report. Severe geomagnetic storms, aurora sags south, HF disruptions, satellite drag spikes, copper red at twilight. Ionospheric shifts can damp wind locally. Evidence is mixed, but pressure fields do adjust. None of that guarantees a wave. It builds a coupling story that doesn't require invaders. Space to air, air to sea, sea to rock, rock to everything else. He tried to rescue specifics from fear. Winds return late, he said. Gusty from directions streets don't expect. He marked down branches in odd alleys and circled intersections that collect debris. He drew a tiny battery symbol near a church and wrote radio here. Practical over mystical. We go dark before we get wet, he'd said earlier. Here he added, we hear each other again on batteries first. He softened when he hit people. A kid looks up and says the sky looks sick, he murmured, half to himself. Parents say it's pretty. He winced at the mismatch and didn't scold anyone on the page. He added a note in the margin, calm as the last breath. He crossed out last and wrote final, then crossed that out and left the line bare. He didn't want flourish. He wanted a cue you could recognize without a degree. Anchor one action to the sky, the monitor said, bending protocol to give him a handhold. He nodded. If the curtain hangs where it shouldn't and the wind feels held, he said, people on low ground move without waiting for sirens. He tapped the hill numbers he'd written earlier. You climb now. The room let the sky lead the water for once. If the sky tells time, the shoreline keeps score. He wasn't selling certainty. He was selling a clock. And if you've got a clock, you don't argue with it, you move. Echoes in the archives. If the sky could timestamp the event, maybe the ground left receipts. That was the hunch that sent two analysts into basements that smelled like dust and old glue. Stakes were simple. Precedent doesn't predict, but it can keep you from calling a black swan when it's a migrating season you forgot. They weren't hunting a perfect match. They were listening for a chord. One of them had written a refusal memo on Comet Talk 3 years earlier. She pulled younger Dryas files anyway, not for an impact verdict, but for the way climate can snap hard and fast. The black mat reappeared across papers, thin, dark layers peppered with oddities. Platinum spikes reported at unusual concentrations. Magnetic spherules clustered like industrial slag without an industry. Charcoal bands that whisper continent-scale burning. Then the counterpoint, critiques calling sampling biased, statistics overfit, contamination likely. She taped two notes side by side on a wall. Abrupt change is real. The impact hypothesis is contested. That honesty kept the room sane. They stretched a timeline across a corkboard. Ice core jumps that look like cliff faces, decades, not millennia. Lake varves counting cold years like beads. A second column took shape with oral histories. Coastlines that leaned away and returned higher. Stories about walking seafloors and the sea coming back like a wall. No one called myths data. But hearing the same shape across tongues made them ask what carved it. Complication is where confirmation bias eats teams. So they forced counterexamples onto the board. Meltwater pulses from collapsing. Ice sheets can flood basins without help from the sky. Tidal triggering literature on earthquakes is mixed. Some statistically weak correlations near spring tides. Many null results when methods tighten. A volcanologist with a quiet voice wrote conditional in a margin and underlined it twice. The point wasn't to build a courtroom case. The point was to accept that Earth keeps secrets and repeats motifs. Then a thin translation from a monastic ledger slid across the table. 14th century. A coastal brother wrote of a silent wind that made birds drop into cloisters like stones. The sea leaned away, he wrote, exposing things men were not meant to walk, and returned as a wall that did not break. The date was mushy. The details were domestic and precise about the wrong things. The analyst copied Silent Wind under the auroral curtain sketch and refused to call it proof. It lived as a rhyming couplet across centuries. Elsewhere in the stacks, shelf resonance studies shifted from sleep aids to warnings. Give a coastal basin energy at its natural period and it rings. Bays become tuning forks. Shelves become drumheads. Phase alignment matters, frequency, geometry, bathymetry. He'd ticked intervals on the rising face like a habit. The math said that habit might be the systems. Parallel tracks crossed again with sober documents. National academies work on abrupt climate change warned that the system can move faster than guidance can publish. NOAA bulletins on long-wave amplification and harbor seiches read like instruction manuals for towns that think only storms make water climb stairs. Cascadia state plans mapped vertical evacuation towers without poetry. None of this proved a date. All of it built a room where his waveform didn't feel lonely. A junior researcher found storm chronicles from mid-latitudes noting northern lights like day, in places that never named them, clustered around decades with notable quakes in other basins. No straight line, a hum. Space weather logs from the 1859 Carrington event and the 1921 storm described copper skies, telegraph fires, and strange stillness. Again, not a bridge to water. A reminder that the sky can get loud in ways ground systems hear. They kept their ethics visible. Every sticky note got a tag: confirmed, documented, inferred, contested. Younger Drya's impact, contested. Abrupt shifts, documented. Shelf resonance, documented. Tidal triggering, mixed. Space weather, grid coupling, documented. Space weather, tsunami coupling, inferred. It wasn't a hedge, it was a map of where certainty ends. Then a human beat broke the lab tone. The operative, who wasn't supposed to see the archives, ended up holding the monastery page. He traced Silent Wind with a fingertip and said, "They heard it too." The monitor logged the breach. The damage was done. The past stopped being a story and started acting like a witness. Unknown to them, across town, a coastal commission quietly revised inundation zones inland by blocks along rivers and labeled it Model Refinement. The update arrived the same week a university risk lab published a SAISH study showing a specific bay's resonant period matched a long-wave packet family that rides subduction tsunamis. The numbers didn't say when. They said how big, how fast, how long. 3 days earlier, something small had occurred that none of them connected. A telecom archived a white paper on geomagnetically induced currents in long buried lines that run parallel to a coastal shelf. It recommended sacrificial links and revised grounding. Boring. Technical. Exactly the kind of breadcrumb that forgets it's part of a plot. The archival chorus landed as a posture, not a prophecy. They couldn't prove a wave on a date. They could prove Earth likes to move in jumps, that basins sing, that skies press, and that people remember shapes with the vocabulary they have. They wrote a restrained line in the working memo. Precedent supports the plausibility of coupled, abrupt coastal change. Timing remains unconstrained. Impact was a decision disguised as humility. They would keep building the case like engineers, document the mechanisms, mark the uncertainties, and refuse to lean on romance. But they would stop pretending the past was quiet. The rocks keep score. The sky leaves notes. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, a monk's sentence is the only siren you get. The unauthorized timestamp. He wasn't supposed to touch time. The rule lived in his hands as much as his head. No self-targeting, no dates, no anchors that turn the instrument into the target. But after the curtain, the shelf, the bracket, when stopped sleeping, he signed out a practice room on a Saturday, calibration, breathing drills, nothing that would ping a supervisor, and laid a blank sheet down like a confession. Stakes were simple and sharp. Break protocol, and you don't just contaminate data. You risk your clearance and your mind. He told himself he wasn't predicting a world. He was checking a point on his own line. He framed it the way training taught without words. Me at that date, wherever I am. The air felt wrong before the pencil touched paper. Not cold, damp. Action arrived as absence. He waited for the heartbeat he'd used as a metronome since the nickname stuck and found a hole where sound should be. Not faint. Gone. He put fingers to his neck, stopped, embarrassed alone in a room that forgives nothing. He palmed the table edge like a dock in the dark. Damp stone through skin. Not dripping, just a chill that soaked in. The smell wasn't rot. It was mineral and metallic, like earth that forgot sunlight. He wrote without deciding to. Resonance, he scrawled, then winced and softened it, through bone. The vibration wasn't loud. It carried like a carrier wave you ride without consent. Arcs filled the page, not cartoon waves, ribs, evenly spaced, repeating. His hand tapped a rhythm onto the baseline, and the pencil started marking ticks between arcs like breath marks. Complication hit with a jolt that made the chair scrape. The pen slashed a short dark line across the ribs at a node, not a crest, like something had caught him mid-count. His mouth moved and he tasted copper, then dirt, then old water with no salt. He swallowed hard. Hair on his arms lifted like someone had rubbed amber on the room. Then the number fell through him, fast, precise. Not the date. He'd already written that sin at the top without drama. The time. For digits with the colon jammed after the second, like his hand outran his caution. He blinked at it and felt a superstition he hadn't indulged since he was a kid. If you look straight at a thing, it looks back. He turned the page and wrote the same time in mirror script, tidy as print, then bracketed both and trimmed the window with 2 small dashes the way you mark a held note. Impact unfolded as his professional brain woke up inside the trespasser's body. Time implies longitude. He let the Earth's rotation run in his head and nudged the earlier coordinate band east a hair on the page. He wrote tide, irrelevant, and underlined it because he wanted tide to matter and knew it wouldn't. He started to pencil 3 letters that would pin a time zone, stopped, crossed them out, drew a small square instead, and wrote local beside it, the word he used when labels smelled like guesswork. He stood, paced once, sat. He tried to ask a practical question of the future without pretending he believed in omens. Elevation, he wrote, and his hand refused a single number. It drew 5 steps, then 7, then 9. He circled 9 and added above grade, because specificity calmed him when numbers didn't. Rise time. His hand wrote minutes, not seconds, then scratched minutes until the graphite looked like fur. Human leaked onto paper. He folded a smaller sheet and wrote a note that wasn't prophecy. It was instruction. Keys on the nail by the back door. Valve turns clockwise. Analog map drawer, bottom left. Dog food in the bin behind the washer. Radio on VHF channel 3 if phones die. He sealed it, wrote a child's first name, and slid it into an evidence envelope like it was a lab sample. The clerk logged it and didn't ask. He drew a box on a slope above a familiar river bend, a doorway shape, and wrote 1 word near it in clean letters, after. The pencil lingered. He added 3 small dots beside it like he wanted to say more and refused. Then he did the thing that would get him caught. He bagged his own pages, logged his own tape, stacked them by the recorder, and signed chain of custody with a hand that stopped shaking once the ink hit paper. When the monitor found him, she didn't scold. She called it in. In the debrief that wasn't a debrief, she asked, "Why?" He stared at the wall like it could absorb heat. "If it's going to happen, I wanted to know what it does to me," he said. "Not noble. Plain. I wanted to be useful." Analysts triangulated the mirror time against the band in whispers. The window narrowed from a day to hours, then to a pulse centered near mid-afternoon local. A colonel moved a meeting off the calendar without explanation and wrote a note no FOIA loves. Irreversible, windowed. The file with the sealed note went into a safe with a new combination. The rulebook wrapped itself around him like a blanket and then let go. He'd broken it clean. The program would have to decide whether to break. With him or follow his clock. The decision to distract. Leadership called it a posture review, the way you name a fire drill while you smell smoke. The folder with the mirror script time sat on the table like a live wire. Nobody said panic. They said continuity, stability, managed information environment. Translation. How do you move steel without moving minds? The first move arrived as an interagency memo with soft edges. Ambient distraction, it proposed, as if noise could be a safety net. The logic was cold and simple. Fragment the truth until any one version loses power. Keep attention busy on curiosities that feel urgent but don't mobilize. Normalize the abnormal so a copper sky registers as content, not a cue. They built a toolkit that didn't look like a toolkit. Controlled releases on UAP. Credible enough to spin debate, never enough to land. Culture war cycles scheduled like holidays, engineered to peak when calendars get tense. Platform tweaks that reward conflict clips and throttle maps, models, and coordinates under the banner of reducing harmful speculation. Headline cadence tuned for doom fatigue. Show the cliff so often people stop looking over it. A strategist in a blue suit called it noise as anesthesia and smiled like he'd named a ship. Complication walked in with a spine. A policy lead, sharp, careful, said the words those rooms avoid. We owe people informed consent. She laid out a phased path, plain language coastal hazard messaging, vertical evacuation funding with signage that says what it is, incentive structures for retreat that don't punish the poor, drills that name the thing and practice the route. She didn't sell doom. She sold readiness wrapped in decency. The room thanked her for rigor. The memo went to stakeholder review. A month later, she was reassigned to drought. Meanwhile, the distraction architecture sprouted legs. Social feeds quietly added a filter that downranked posts combining coastal maps with dates and evacuation verbs. Accounts that posted too many elevation charts saw reach edge down, framed as reducing coordinated harm. Same week, a public-private consortium announced resilience corridors, grants for inland road upgrades connecting secondary towns. The press release praised economic vitality. The map matched Cascadia evacuation spines like a photocopy. Micro-stories carried the taste of policy without the headline. A coastal county received talking points for multi-hazard events, emphasizing personal preparedness and avoiding specifics about elevation or distance from shore. The same county signed an MOU with a hospital network to relocate a backup ICU 20 miles inland on a ridgeline with 2 feeds. The slide deck called it operational efficiency. In a closed meeting, someone circled a date and erased it before the janitor came. Inside the unit, the paperwork moved toward an ending that wasn't an end. The program dissolved into harmless acronyms, staff reassigned, files boxed and migrated to rooms with badges, not names. Off-book, their budget's shadow flowed into an office with a title built to be quoted: Societal Resilience to Information Overload. Roundtables convened to discuss narrative management. Speakers used words like cohesion and calm. No one said wave. A fight dragged across carpet in low voices. Mitigate, don't medicate, one analyst muttered. You can't evacuate the Pacific, another shot back. They weren't cynics, they were tired. The colonel, who thought in maps and fuel curves, traced a finger along a bridge line and counted how many spans you'd have to hold to move 100,000 people uphill in a clock measured in minutes. He closed the folder. We harden what we can and keep the peace. A refusal landed with quiet force. A mid-level official declined to sign the memo authorizing the distraction suite. Her dissent read like a letter to a future committee. Informed hazard, phased retreat, drills with plain words, ICU relocations explained, not disguised. She resigned 2 days later. A reporter received a hint that didn't look like a story and filed it as an oddity. It drowned under celebrity noise. Backchannel signals kept blinking. A platform policy change labeled context integrity became a net that swept up coastal hazard posts with time windows. A legal review sanitized a spec from tsunami-safe stairwell to vertical evacuation, preserving the bolts and changing the plaque. A procurement officer joked about parks with stairs and didn't write it down. They wrapped the decision in ethics language to keep their own hands steady. Tail risk, asymmetric cost, collateral panic. If they warned and nothing happened, you'd buy lawsuits and cynicism. If they stayed quiet and hit, you'd buy grief. They picked a path governments and democracies pick when confronted with physics. Distribute the mitigation, diffuse the story. Everywhere and nowhere. The operative watched the room choose noise and didn't argue. He asked for reassignment instead. The colonel granted it without ceremony. Fitness for duty check. No farewell cake. A memo went out with a line that will sit in throats for years. We don't do predictions, we do preparedness. Still, process insisted on one last pass. Triple blind, clean slate, a room with a thicker door and a recorder with a new serial number. It wasn't drama. It was hygiene and hope, the small chance that the mind had built a loop and would step off if given clean air. If he drifted elsewhere, everything they'd set in motion could be recast as prudence. If he landed on the line again, the distraction plan would stop reading like strategy and start feeling like surrender. While that was happening in conference rooms, money kept walking inland with its head down. Substation elevations tucked into maintenance cycles. Inland data centers gained EM shielding that nobody toured. Hospitals tested transfer switches on ridgelines quietly during holidays. Bridges got scour protection that looked like routine. The public story stayed fractured by design. The steel told a different tale. The choice wasn't framed as right versus wrong. It was framed as timing versus trust. They chose timing. They bet that calm buys trucks days and keeps shelves orderly when the lights blink. They bet that people forgive vagueness faster than they forgive false alarms. They bet that stairs with pretty plaques work even when the plaque lies. In the aftermath of that meeting, nobody cheered. They breathed the way people do after lifting something they shouldn't have to lift. The folder with the mirrored time slid into a safe with a new code. A calendar notification moved without a reason line. And the hum the operative couldn't shake found a new home. In policies built to keep cities from hearing it until the hour they have to climb. The crisis passed when everything changed. They picked the room nobody liked. No windows, thicker door, a recorder with a fresh serial. Triple blind, tasker offsite, monitor in the dark, viewer clean. Stakes weren't spoken. If he drifted, they could call it psychology. If he landed, the file would name itself. He came in with that quiet he wore when the floor felt tilted. The monitor set cadence like a metronome someone else could trust. Describe primary gestalt. He breathed, let his shoulders drop, and wrote 3 words he'd written too many times: open moving edge. The pencil slid and traced a coast with no hesitation, a shoulder of water that knew the paper better than he did. He shaded nearshore and left the outer sea unmarked, distance held back like a boundary he respected. Dominant sensory. He pressed under his ear. Wait, he said. Held air. Copper light. The monitor didn't react. Describe motion. The line climbed the page steeper than before, a slope with muscle. He ticked the rising face with even marks as if time itself were being counted. Packages, he said. Intervals. Pull, release, climb, then repeats. He rubbed his sternum. Hums back lower. He didn't reach for angles or hulls. He sketched systems breaking in sequence. Ports first, he said, drawing rectangles that lift and turn like toys. Containers ride backwards through the mouth. He scribbled arrows along channels no one built for that job. Grid by salt goes. He X'd small squares coastal, circled a bigger one inland. Transfer yard holds, hours not days. He tapped a dot on a slope. Clinic stays lit longer than it should. The monitor kept him in procedure. Sequence. He tapped the pencil 4 times on the table. Ports, he said. Tap. Coastal substations. Tap. Hospitals near water. Tap. Water treatment. He underlined the last without drawing a line. Brown taps while streets look normal. People waste the quiet. He winced like he wanted that to be wrong. She pulled him inland. He mapped low ridges with modest numbers. Elevation buys minutes, he said softly. Minutes buy lives. He traced side streets that climb when freeways don't and circled 3 bridges. 2 fail at Scour, he said. 1 stands south of the inlet. He breathed, then added, ambulances stack on the wrong approach. He refused names, clung to descriptors. Curtain already there before first pull, he said. No wind. Wrong daylight. Birds absent. He wrote stillness again, smaller, as if not to tempt the room. The monitor nudged toward falsification. Moved to an alternate coastal gestalt within the window. He tried. The pencil hovered, drew a softer shoreline, then slid back to the shoulder as if the page had grooves. Keeps choosing itself, he murmured, annoyed at his own words. Across town, a parallel team ran a decoy. Describe interior industrial process. Their viewers sketched ducts and heat exchangers, then misplaced a curve that looked like a wave and crossed it out angrily. Later, a blind judge would note motif leakage risk. It didn't fix the room they were in. His body told the time. Skin flushed, pulse climbed. He wrote a number in the margin, small, a local hour without a label, and bracketed it tighter than before, trimming by dashes like breath marks. He didn't say the colon. He didn't need to. The monitor logged it with calm she didn't feel. Describe the thing you didn't expect. He thought, then said, we go dark before we get wet. He added, radio before sirens. Complication cut human, Do we tell them? He asked, not looking up. The monitor stayed in line. Describe immediate actions that preserve function. He nodded. Hospitals on slopes pre-stage oxygen and fuel high, he said. Clinics own keys. Warehouse managers pick a pallet order. He drew a tiny battery symbol near a church and wrote VHF here. Someone has to know channel names, he added. Phones won't carry. He pressed the pencil hard enough to crease the paper and made a box on a hill above a river bend. He wrote after, again, neat letters like practice. Communities that do okay have 3 things, he said. Water that doesn't need power. Radio with batteries. A person who knows where the map lives. He blinked like he'd shocked himself with how small that sounded. Small isn't small, he corrected. The monitor risked 1 anchor. Elevations? He drew steps, 5, 7, 9. He circled 9 above grade and shrugged, hating imprecision. Minutes, not seconds, he repeated. People who move on sky cues arrive with breath left. He drew 2 arrows, 1 too late, 1 early. He circled early. Meanwhile, in a different building, a colonel read the live relay and moved his finger along a bridge line on a map. He wrote an instruction that wasn't prophecy, fuel both feeds. He circled a transfer yard and wrote keep dry. He didn't need belief. He needed capacity when trucks stumbled. Back in the room, the hum faded. He set the pencil down like it was hot. I want reassignment, he said, voice even. Anything else? The monitor didn't look up from her notes. Noted, she said, because the script is a raft you don't abandon in rapids. He stood. No wobble. A damp handprint on the table where his palm had been. Impact landed as a single word written in block letters at the top of the transcript by a hand that never editorialized, irreversible. Not forever, baseline moved. The colonel signed the chain of custody, then said the line that would replace belief with logistics. Clear him. Quietly. It wasn't kindness. It was triage, for a man in a program that had reached the edge of their map. He walked into a hallway that smelled like binder glue and old coffee, past posters that promised precision. Outside, the wind finally moved. He lifted his face like a man learning to breathe in a new altitude. In a drawer upstairs, the mirrored time sat between budgets and maps. The decision to distract didn't change. It only lost the comfort of maybe. The ones who prepared anyway. Not everyone waited for a memo. A thin, quiet network formed. No oath, no list. Just people who'd sat near the sealed pages or heard the hum described by someone they trusted. They didn't call it prepping. They called it moving. It started with leases. A couple 3 blocks from the bay signed papers on a tired house 2 ridgelines inland, 64 feet above grade, crawl space high enough for bins and a water tote. He told his partner it was for schools. She didn't ask for the real reason. They swapped the gas range for induction, added a transfer switch, and learned the sound the fridge doesn't make when the neighborhood goes dark. A telecom systems guy ended his Ocean View lease and bought a cabin at the end of a gravel road. Twice a month he worked the hand lever on the well, so it'd never be theory. Shelves got labels like he was soothing his own head: water, filters, meds. He tucked spare radios and a cheap SDR dongle into foil sleeves with handwritten tags, baseband, handset, fob, and slid paper maps under a cutting board. Routes circled around bridges like moles he'd ask a doctor about later. Details, not drama, changed lives. A nurse in a coastal clinic started pestering facilities about generator fuel stratification and asked for a second tank on higher pads. She didn't say why. She pushed for oxygen cylinders upstairs and got eye rolls, then signatures. A school custodian with a ham license mounted a VHF antenna in a wellness room on the 2nd floor and taught 8th graders to key up a call sign without giggling. Microstories stacked. A city planner who'd survived too many stakeholder meetings began biking the inland evacuation spine at dawn, timing lights and shoulder widths. He bought a coffee for a grocery manager and asked which pallets go first when power drops. They made a list that didn't look like heroics: insulin, formula, batteries, rice. He wrote the aisle numbers on a sticky and stuck it under his mouse pad. Complication tugged at homes. A teenager missed salt air and a team by the pier. A partner stared at hills that smelled like dust and called the silence boring. Jobs didn't hop ridgelines gracefully. One woman walked into HR with a resignation letter and a polite smile, then drove 2 states east for a pay cut and a smaller sky. Meanwhile, small towns adjusted in ways that read like common sense. A rural co-op strung a second feed around a floodplain. A clinic bought a crank ultrasound and a manual suction pump because batteries fail in stories, not just drills. A church mounted a lockbox outside with a laminated card, VHF channel numbers, a phone tree, a map to a hill. The pastor hated acronyms, so the card didn't have any. A contractor who'd poured slabs near the water for 30 years got a spec for breakaway walls, elevated mechanicals, and a top-floor refuge with independent comms. Wrong coast, he joked. The project manager didn't laugh. He bolted steel he'd never bolt that high, ran conduit to a room with an unlabeled door, and installed a second generator that didn't appear on the tour. After a winter storm shaved 6 feet off a parking lot, he stood by the new rail and stopped joking. A mother built analog into muscle memory. Paper copies of numbers her kids had never memorized, because phones always remembered. Pencils and a crank radio lived in a drawer beside a map with one route highlighted in yellow and a second in red. She hung a wrench on a nail next to the gas meter, taught her son clockwise and counterclockwise, and said, "You won't need this until you do." They learned radios like recipes. A neighbor's call sign became a habit after dinner. Baofengs chirped across fences. People who'd never said simplex learned to pick a quiet channel and say their street name. It felt silly until the first wind event took cell towers down for 8 hours. A teenager, rolling eyes, checked in anyway and found it easy. Grief threaded through the practical. One couple split when move inland sounded like abandoning who they were. Another came back for a birthday and ran a hand along a new edge where asphalt used to be. The ocean had eaten a stripe of lot and a piece of denial. Nobody said I told you so. They loaded cupcakes and went home uphill. Money followed sense in places that still pretend decisions are neutral. A hospital board approved a satellite ICU on a ridge for operational efficiency. A warehouse 2 valleys overfunded a backup well, gravity-fed, because pumps don't take opinions. A wastewater plant ordered extra manual gate keys and asked a machinist to cut duplicates, then hid them in 3 places and told 5 people. They built lists and left them where hands would find them. Keys on the nail. Valve clockwise. Channel 3 if phones die. Check on Mrs. Alvarez, she won't ask, written in a margin that looked like care, not doom. The note the operative sealed infected their posture. Practical beats prophetic. Elevation buys minutes. Minutes become lives. They kept it small on purpose. 1 hill. 1 bridge. 1 room with a lock and water. 1 neighbor whose name you know. None of it proved a date. All of it worked for wind, fire, quakes, or the long weird we already live. They weren't waiting for sirens. They were writing a script you can run without electricity. Quiet readiness looked odd to friends who stayed by the water. That was fine. They weren't recruiting. They were rehearsing. And when the wind went still one evening, and the sky wore a color no one had a word for, they didn't argue with it. They picked up the wrench, the radio, the map, and they moved. The date delivered. You've walked the rooms, felt the hum, watched the guardrails bend. Here's what sits inside the sealed envelope, with the boundaries we promised to keep. First, what's hard fact versus careful inference? Hard fact, a calendar date spoken clean in session, then written again in mirror script under stress. Hard fact, a time window bracketed to hours, mirrored and tightened on an unauthorized pass marked local. Hard fact, a narrow coordinate band recorded as degrees and minutes, chain of custody clean. Inference, the whispered city name. Inference, the coupling path from auroral curtain to shelf resonance to basin amplification. We'll say exactly where contested belongs. The date, November 5th, 2026. He said it without hunting. He wrote it backward like he didn't want his own eyes to catch it. The window, 1430 to 1710 local, halved on the mirror pass to center near 1540. He bracketed it like breath marks, then shaved the edges as if the Earth's rotation had hands. The coordinate band, 44.8 degrees to 45.5 degrees north, 123.6 degrees to 124.4 degrees west. That lays over the mid-latitude Pacific Northwest coast. Not an address, an arc chain of custody is boring until it isn't. Tape flagged, pages bagged, signatures stacked. Courier cases logged through rooms where careers go to live or end. We saw the routing, the metadata, the handwriting that gets people fired if it bends. None of that makes the future a railroad. It makes the record real. Now the caveats that keep this honest. Project Stargate's declassified protocols warn against unverifiable future tasking, viewer welfare, expectation contamination, data integrity. This violated those cautions. The team understood the risk and documented it anyway. Geophysically, subduction tsunamis on the Cascadia margin are a matter of when, not if, in state and federal planning. Space weather coupling to ocean resonance is plausible in mechanism and thin in proof at event scale. Younger Dryas impact talk. Contested. We used it for abruptness, not as a pillar. What the coordinates imply is ugly and practical. Ports sit low by design, they fail first. Grids near salt blink early. Hospitals that bet on diesel at elevation win minutes. Those that didn't lose before surge. Inland river corridors become roads. Bridges filter who lives where after. This is already in Cascadia playbooks, months-long outages, vertical evacuation, lifeline corridors. His bracket doesn't invent the risk. It collapses the timeline. Policy consequences are why the date got buried in a safe. A month stamped to a coast moves markets, mortgages, and elections. Insurance flees. Lawsuits bloom. Who knew when and why didn't they warn? So they picked the anesthetic, distraction up top, steel inland below. You can hate the ethics and still see the logic. False alarms scar trust. Misses scar people. What do you do with a Tuesday at 1540 that may never arrive? You treat it like a drill with stakes. If you're inside that band on low ground, identify 2 walkable hills, time both. Know which bridge stands and which shoulder collapses. Keep water that doesn't need power. Put a crank radio and paper maps where your hands can find them in the dark. Label shutoffs, hang the wrench. If the sky hangs a copper curtain and wind feels held, you climb now. Not after sirens, not after a text that might never land. If you're inland, you're not an audience, you're a link. Clinics need oxygen and fuel on the 2nd floor. Warehouses need pallet orders that start with insulin, formula batteries. Churches need keys and a laminated radio channel card. Amateur radio nets need names, not just call signs. We go dark before we get wet isn't doom, it's sequence. If nothing happens on November 5th, 2026, you didn't waste a life. You hardened for fires, storms, quakes, and the long weird that's already here. If something moves, the boring work buys breath. That sealed note he left wasn't prophecy, it was instructions. Keys on the nail, valve clockwise, channel 3, check on the neighbor who won't ask. He wanted to be useful. That's the posture. We're not asking for belief. We're asking for posture. The record is clean. The mechanisms are documented. The coupling claim is plausible and not proven. The coordinates point to a coast already planning for a wall of water on a longer clock. The date shrinks. That clock. You decide whether you're a spectator or a neighbor. There's one more thing that lives between lines. Irreversible didn't mean forever. It meant the baseline moves. After isn't a wasteland, it's a town that learned its map. If the curtain hangs and the wind goes quiet, you don't argue with the sky. You count your steps. You go. And on the hill you circled in yellow, you make room. What it means if he was right, and if he was wrong. Start with the psychology, not the gear. Normalcy bias says tomorrow looks like today because yesterday did. Learned helplessness says systems are too big, so scroll instead. Doom fatigue turns warnings into wallpaper. Break those 3, and you move. If he was right, usefulness beats certainty. Treat November 5th, 2026 like a drill you run without permission. Elevation buys minutes, minutes become lives. Pick 2 hills you can walk, time both, and write the numbers on a card. Identify one bridge that stands and one shoulder that slides. Mark the detour in pen on a paper map. Hang a wrench by the gas meter. Label shutoffs. Put a crank radio and spare batteries where your hands actually reach in the dark. Store water that doesn't need power. Practice one radio check with a neighbor on VHF. No jargon, just a channel and a call sign you can say without laughing. If he was wrong, the same work pays off in storms, fires, outages, and the long weird we already live. It's not a bunker, it's a habit. Hospitals on slopes pre-stage oxygen and fuel high. Clinics own keys. Warehouses draft pallet orders that start with insulin, formula, batteries. Churches hold a laminated card with channel numbers and a phone tree that works with paper. Amateur nets learn names, not just call signs. Government behavior under uncertainty will feel familiar. They hedge. They harden quietly. They rename stairs as parks and push grants into resilience corridors. Expect multi-hazard to carry the weight of the thing they won't say. Expect platform filters to downrank posts that combine maps, dates, and evacuation verbs. Don't argue with the filter, build local signal, flyers, porch talks, drills that look like block parties. Space weather coupling to ocean resonance remains plausible, not proven. Cascadia rupture risk is documented, in plans, not prophecy. Treat the mechanism with humility, and the timeline with respect. The operative's window is a clock, not a guarantee. Anchor behavior to cues you can verify. Copper daylight, held wind. A steady curtain at latitudes where curtains don't belong. HF weird, cell hiccups. If those stack while you stand on low ground inside that band, you move now. No siren needed. The ethic is quiet stewardship. You don't owe belief in a man. You owe readiness to people you can name. Keys on the nail. Valve clockwise. Channel 3 if phones die. Check on the neighbor who won't ask. If nothing happens, you've built competence. If something moves, competence buys breath. One more posture shift. After isn't ruin, it's a new baseline. Baselines always move. The towns that remember maps, radios, water, and second-floor rooms keep their shape. The ones that wait for permission lose hours they needed. You won't get permission. You'll get a sky that looks wrong and a clock you can feel in your bones. Count your steps. Go. Resolution and broader meaning. He didn't name an enemy. He named a schedule a living planet might keep while we argue with calendars. If this sharpened your sense of time, learn one hill, one bridge, one channel, and one neighbor's name. Subscribe for the follow-up on coastal drills and the release of that sealed note. Share this with one person on low ground, and then make a plan you'll be grateful for, even if nothing happens.